Jake Morrison walked through the long, metal hallways of Harmony Prime. The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, home to the Galactic Council. Jake had been Earth's ambassador here for 3 years now. His footsteps echoed on the polished floors as he made his way to another meeting. The station buzzed with activity. Alien beings from dozens of worlds hurried past him. Some looked like tall birds with colorful feathers. Others resembled walking trees with many arms. A few had blue skin and large black eyes. All of them looked worried. The war was getting worse every day. Jake reached the council chamber and paused at the door. Inside, he could hear voices speaking in different alien languages. The translation device in his ear turned their words into English. They were arguing about battle plans and lost worlds. Jake took a deep breath and walked inside. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in a circle. At the center stood Chancellor Zixthara, leader of the Veltar Coalition. She was tall and thin, with silver skin that sparkled under the lights. Her large eyes held a sadness that Jake had seen grow deeper over the past months. "Ambassador Morrison," she said as Jake took his seat. "Thank you for coming." Jake nodded. "Of course, Chancellor. How can humanity help today?" The Chancellor touched a control panel, and the air above them filled with moving pictures made of light. Jake saw star maps showing the galaxy. Red marks covered many areas. Those were the worlds taken by the Kethfor swarm. "The situation grows more desperate," the Chancellor said. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of terrible news. "In the past month, we have lost 12 more star systems. The swarm shows no signs of slowing down." Jake studied the map. The red areas had grown since his last briefing. Entire sectors of space now belong to the enemy. What about the coalition fleets? Are they holding the line anywhere? An alien that looked like a giant insect spoke up. His name was Kliktar, and he commanded what remained of the HFY War fleet. "We fight, but it is not enough. The swarm adapts to our weapons. What works today fails tomorrow. They learn from every battle." Another delegate, this one covered in crystal-like scales, added her voice. "My people have built new defensive platforms around our homeworld. The swarm broke through them in 6 hours. 6 hours, Ambassador Morrison. Defenses that took us years to build." The Chancellor waved her hand, and new images appeared. These showed planets under attack. Jake had seen such pictures before, but they never got easier to watch. Massive bioships, grown rather than built, descended on populated worlds. The Kethfor swarm was not like other enemies. They did not just conquer, they consumed. "Look at this," the Chancellor said, pointing to one image. This was Velinara, one of our garden worlds. 2 million of my people live there. They grew food for 6 other systems. The image showed a world stripped bare. Where once green fields and blue oceans had covered the surface, now only gray metal and strange organic growths remained. The swarm had turned the entire planet into a factory for making more bioships. What happened to the people? Jake asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "The lucky ones died quickly," Kliktar said, his insect-like voice clicking. "With anger. The others were taken for processing. The swarm uses living beings as raw material for their ships and weapons." Jake felt sick. He had heard these reports before, but seeing the images made it real. An entire world, millions of people, gone in just a few days. And it was happening over and over across the galaxy. "We need your help," the Chancellor said, turning to face Jake directly. "Humanity has stayed neutral in this war for 3 years. You have given us medical supplies and food. You have sheltered our refugees. But we need more than charity now. We need your military forces." This was the request Jake had been expecting. It came up in every meeting now. The coalition was desperate. They had lost half their member worlds and most of their fleets. They needed fresh forces, new weapons, something to change the tide of war. Jake had prepared his answer long ago. Chancellor, you know humanity's position. We honor the tree. Of soul, Earth remains neutral in galactic conflicts. We will continue to provide humanitarian aid, but we cannot join this war. The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel the disappointment from every alien present. Some looked angry. Others just looked defeated. But why? Asked Dr. Zenfi, a being that looked like a walking flower. Your ships are advanced. Your people are fighters. We have seen this in your history files. Why do you refuse to help us? Jake chose his words carefully. Humanity values peace above all else. We have seen too much war on our own world. We prefer to help through peaceful means. That was the official answer. The real reason was different, and Jake could not speak it aloud in this chamber. Earth's military leaders had studied the war carefully. Their conclusion was simple and terrifying. The Kethver swarm was too strong. Joining the fight would only add humanity to the list of extinct species. Chancellor Zixthara stepped closer to Jake. Ambassador, I respect your people's desire for peace, but consider this. The swarm does not negotiate. They do not take prisoners except as raw material. They will not stop until every thinking being in the galaxy is dead or converted to serve them. She gestured to the star map again. Look at their pattern of advance. They move in a spiral, consuming everything in their path. At their current rate, they will reach the outer edges of human space in 18 months. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen Earth's intelligence reports. The Chancellor was right about the timeline. But humanity's plan was to build stronger defenses, not to join a losing war. We appreciate your concern, Jake said, but humanity's position remains unchanged. We will help however we can through peaceful means. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. The aliens shared more reports of defeats and losses. They showed images of refugee fleets fleeing their burning worlds. They begged and pleaded for human military aid. Jake gave the same answer every time. When the meeting finally ended, Jake walked back to his quarters alone. The station's hallways seemed quieter now. Fewer aliens moved about their business. Many had already fled to their homeworlds to make final stands or had died in battles across the galaxy. In his private room, Jake activated his secure communication device. Admiral Karen Walsh appeared on the screen. She commanded Earth's defense forces from her headquarters on Luna. How did it go? She asked. The same as always, Jake replied. They're getting more desperate. The losses are accelerating. Admiral Walsh nodded grimly. Our analysis confirms their reports. The swarm is winning on every front. At this rate, organized resistance will collapse within 6 months. And our position? Unchanged. The President has reviewed all scenarios. Joining this war means human extinction. We stay neutral, build our defenses, and hope the swarm can be contained when it reaches our borders. Jake ended the call and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were dying. And humanity, with all its power and technology, chose to watch from the sidelines. He wondered if future generations would understand this choice. He wondered if there would be any future generations left to make that judgment. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison's last meeting with the Galactic Council. The war had gotten much worse. Jake stood in his office aboard Harmony Prime, watching refugee ships arrive through the station's windows. Every day brought more. Survivors from worlds that no longer existed. The ships were packed beyond capacity. Families huddled together in cargo holds. Children who had never known hunger now fought for scraps of food. Jake had seen too many of these ships. Each one carried stories of horror that kept him awake at night. But his assistant, Lisa Grant, entered the office with a data pad. Her face looked tired. She had been working 18-hour days to coordinate refugee aid. "The medical bays are full again," she said. "We have 3 more ships requesting permission to dock." "Approved," Jake said without hesitation. "Find space somewhere. Use the cargo bays if you have to." Lisa nodded, but did not leave. She stood there holding the data pad, her expression troubled. "Jake, I got a message from my brother. He's with the Earth Medical Corps on Station 7. They're running out of supplies. The refugee population there has tripled in the past month." Jake turned from the window. "What kind of supplies?" "Everything. Food, medicine, basic life support equipment. The Kethver attacks are happening so fast now that people are fleeing with nothing. No time to pack, no time to save anything." Jake made a note on his own data pad. "I'll contact Earth Command. We'll send another supply convoy." "That's not enough anymore," Lisa said quietly. "You know it's not enough." Before Jake could respond, his communication device buzzed. The caller was Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Xenobiology Research Institute on Earth. Jake accepted the call, and Elena's worried face appeared on the screen. "Jake, I need to speak with you urgently," Elena said. "I've been analyzing Kethver biosamples from the recent attacks. What I found is disturbing." Jake gestured for Lisa to stay. "What kind of disturbing?" Elena's image flickered as she transferred data files. "The swarm isn't just conquering worlds for resources. They're actively transforming captured populations. The biological changes are systematic and purposeful." New images appeared on Jake's screen. They showed microscopic views of alien tissue samples. Even to Jake's untrained eye, the changes were obvious. Normal cellular structures had been replaced with something else, something that looked more machine than living tissue. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "Evidence of forced evolution," Elena replied. "The Kethver take prisoners and change them at the genetic level. They're creating biological weapons out of living beings. Each species they capture adds new capabilities to their arsenal." Lisa moved closer to see the images. "That's impossible. You can't just rewrite someone's genetics like that." "The Kethver can," Elena said grimly, "and they're getting better at it. Early samples from 3 years ago show crude modifications. Recent samples show incredibly sophisticated biological engineering. They're learning from every species they capture." Jake felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. What does this mean for the war? It means every coalition defeat makes the swarm stronger. Not just because they gain resources, but because they gain new biological templates. They're literally evolving in real time. The communication was interrupted by an emergency alarm. Red lights flashed throughout Jake's office as the station's speakers crackled to life. "All personnel to emergency stations. Incoming distress signal from Meridian Station. Repeat, emergency at Meridian Station." Jake's blood went cold. Meridian Station was a research facility in neutral space. It housed scientists from dozens of species, including 2,000 humans. His niece Amy worked there as a xenolinguist. "Elena, I have to go," Jake said, cutting the communication. He and Lisa ran through the corridors toward the command center. The command center was chaos. Aliens and humans worked frantically at control stations. The main screen showed a star map with Meridian Station's location marked in flashing red dot captain. Ryan Cross, the station's military liaison, spotted Jake and hurried over. "Ambassador, we're receiving a live transmission from Meridian Station. The Kethver are attacking." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The star map disappeared, replaced by a view from inside Meridian Station. The camera shook as explosions rocked the facility. Jake could see researchers running through corridors, many carrying wounded colleagues. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. A familiar voice came through the speakers. "This is Dr. Peter Collins, Meridian Station. We are under attack by Kethver bioships. They appeared without warning and disabled our defenses in the first wave." Jake knew Peter well. They had worked together on several diplomatic missions. Peter was calm under pressure, but now his voice carried barely controlled panic. "The swarm is boarding us," Peter continued. "They're not destroying the station. They're harvesting the population. I repeat, they are taking prisoners." The camera view switched to external sensors. Jake watched in horror as massive bioships attached themselves to Meridian Station like parasites. The alien vessels pulsed with organic light, and Jake could see tunnel-like appendages boring into the station's hull. "Rescue ships are en route," Captain Cross reported. "But they're 6 hours away." 6 hours. Jake knew it'd be too late. The Kethver moved fast when harvesting populations. Within an hour, everyone on Meridian Station would be captured or dead. The transmission continued. Jake saw security teams trying to fight off Kethver boarding parties. The alien invaders looked like a nightmare mixture of insect and machine. They moved through the station's corridors with terrifying efficiency, stunning defenders and dragging them away. "Amy," Jake whispered. His niece was somewhere in that station. The camera view shifted again. Peter Collins appeared on screen, his face bloodied from fighting. Behind him, Jake could see Kethver soldiers approaching. "Tell Earth what happened here," Peter said. "Tell them the swarm doesn't respect neutrality. Tell them we tried to run, but there was nowhere to go." Kethver hands reached into the camera view and grabbed Peter. His screen was cut short as the transmission ended. The command center fell silent. Jake stared at the empty screen, his hands shaking. Around him, aliens and humans wept openly. Meridian Station had been a symbol of peace, a place where different species worked together to advance knowledge. Now it was gone. Hours later, the rescue ships arrived to find only empty space. The Kethver had taken everything: the station, the bioships, and all 50,000 researchers. They left nothing behind but debris and the silence of death. Jake sat alone in his quarters that night, staring at a photo of Amy. She had been so excited about her work on Meridian Station. She believed that understanding between species could prevent wars. Now she was gone, taken by creatures that saw her only as raw material. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Admiral Walsh appeared on his screen, her expression grim. "Jake, I'm sorry about Amy. The President has called an emergency session of the War Council. You need to come home." "Why?" Jake asked, his voice hollow. "Because Meridian Station changed everything. The Kethver attacked a neutral facility. They took human citizens. The President can no longer ignore the threat." Jake looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm was turning Amy and 50,000 others into weapons. The policy of neutrality had not protected them. It had only made them easier targets. "I'll leave on the next transport," Jake said as the communication ended. Jake realized that something fundamental had changed. For 3 years, he had defended humanity's neutral position. He had believed that staying out of the war was the smart choice. But smart choices meant nothing when the enemy did not play by the rules. The Kethver had made their message clear. There were no neutrals in this war. There were only victims waiting their turn. Jake Morrison arrived on Earth to find his home planet transformed. Military ships filled the skies above major cities. Soldiers marched through streets that had known only peace for decades. The news channels showed nothing but war reports, and emergency broadcasts. The transport ship landed at Geneva Spaceport, where Jake was met by Colonel Maria Santos. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth Defense Command and carried herself like a career soldier. "Ambassador Morrison, the President is waiting for you. We need to move quickly." They rode in a military vehicle through the city streets. Jake looked out the windows at crowds of people watching news displays. He saw fear in their faces, but also something else: anger. The attack on Meridian Station had been broadcast across human space. Everyone knew about Amy and the other victims. "How bad is the public reaction?" Jake asked. "Bad enough," Maria replied. 3 major cities have held war rallies. People are demanding action. The president is under enormous pressure to abandon neutrality. They reached the government complex, a series of white buildings connected by covered walkways. Security was tight. Armed guards checked their identification multiple times before allowing them inside. Jake had never seen Earth's capital so heavily protected. President Angela Hayes waited in the Situation Room deep underground. The room was filled with screens showing military data and star maps. Around a large table sat the most powerful people in human government. Jake recognized Admiral Walsh, General Rick Barnes, and Senator Claire Brooks, among others. "Jake," President Hayes said, standing to greet him. She looked older than when he had last seen her. The stress of recent events showed in her gray hair and tired eyes. "Thank you for coming. We need your expertise on galactic affairs." Jake took a seat at the table. "Madam President, I serve at your pleasure. But I should tell you my views on neutrality have been challenged by recent events." "We all have been challenged," the President replied. "General Barnes, please brief Ambassador Morrison on our current situation." General Barnes activated a holographic display above the table. It showed the galaxy with Kethver-controlled territory, marked in red. The red areas had grown dramatically since Jake's last briefing. "The situation is critical," Barnes began. "Coalition resistance has collapsed on 3 major fronts. The swarm now controls 40% of known space." Senator Brooks leaned forward. "General, what's our intelligence on Kethver intentions toward human space?" "Grim," Barnes replied. "Intercepted communications indicate they consider human territory a high-priority target. Our biological makeup makes us ideal candidates for their conversion process." Jake felt sick hearing this confirmed. "What do you mean by conversion process?" "Admiral," Walsh answered, "Dr. Rodriguez's research has revealed the truth about Kethver prisoners. They don't just kill or enslave. They genetically modify captured beings to serve as living weapons. Humans appear to be particularly compatible with their biotechnology." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Jake thought about Amy and wondered what the swarm was doing to her. The thought made him angry in a way he had never experienced before. "There's more," Barnes continued. "Our long-range sensors have detected Kethver scout ships in neutral space, moving toward human territory. They're not waiting for the coalition to fall completely. They're already positioning for their next attack." President Hayes stood and walked to one of the wall screens. It showed Earth from orbit, blue and peaceful against the black of space. "For 3 years, we believed neutrality would protect us. We thought we could stay out of this war and survive. The attack on Meridian Station proved us wrong." She turned back to face the table. "The question now is what we do about it. Senator Brooks, what's the mood in Congress?" "Angry," Brooks replied immediately. "Both parties are united in demanding action. The neutralist movement has lost all support since Meridian Station. People want revenge for Amy Morrison and the other victims." Jake was surprised to hear his niece mentioned by name. "Amy has become a symbol?" "The media has focused on her story," Brooks explained. "A young woman dedicated to peace, murdered by aliens who don't understand the concept. It's powerful imagery." "Admiral," Walsh activated another display. We have options, but they're all dangerous. Option 1 is purely defensive. We fortify human space and hope our defenses can hold when the swarm arrives. What are our chances with that approach? The President asked. Poor, Walsh admitted. The Kethver have broken every defensive line they've encountered. We might delay them, but we can't stop them. Option 2? President Hayes prompted. Full military mobilization, General Barnes said. We join the war and commit everything to defeating the swarm before they reach human space. Jake leaned forward. What would that involve? Barnes smiled grimly. That's classified, Ambassador. But I can tell you that humanity has not been idle. During this war, we've been preparing. Preparing how? Admiral Walsh exchanged a look with the President, who nodded permission to continue. Jake, humanity has been developing weapons specifically designed to fight the Kethver. We've studied their biotechnology and found weaknesses. What kind of weaknesses? Dr. Rodriguez can explain better, but the basic principle is simple. The swarm's greatest strength is also their weakness. Their bioships and converted soldiers all share similar genetic markers. We've developed weapons that target those markers. Jake tried to process this information. You're talking about biological warfare. We're talking about survival, President Hayes said firmly. The Kethver have shown they don't recognize concepts like neutrality or civilian immunity. They see all life as resources to be harvested. The meeting continued for hours. Jake learned that Earth had been secretly building a massive military force. Hidden shipyards constructed new classes of warships. Research facilities developed. Advanced weapons. Training camps prepared soldiers for combat against alien enemies. Why wasn't I told about this? Jake asked. Because your job was to maintain the appearance of neutrality, Admiral Walsh explained. If other species suspected humanity was preparing for war, it would have complicated your diplomatic work. Jake felt betrayed, but also relieved. At least, Earth had not been completely unprepared. So what happens now? President Hayes looked around the table at her advisors. That's what we're here to decide. The old policy of neutrality is dead. The question is, what replaces it? The debate that followed was intense. Some argued for a gradual buildup, slowly introducing human forces to the war. Others wanted an immediate, massive intervention. A few still hoped for a defensive strategy. Finally, President Hayes called for quiet. I've heard all the arguments. My decision is this. We will join the war, but we will do it on our terms. Ambassador Morrison, I'm sending you back to the Galactic Council with new instructions. What kind of instructions? You're going to tell them that humanity's position has changed. We are no longer neutral observers. We are active participants. In this war, Jake felt a mixture of fear and excitement. After 3 years of watching from the sidelines, humanity was finally going to act. What about the coalition? What's left of it? Intelligence reports suggest 3 species are still offering organized resistance, Barnes replied. The Veltar, the Ethmer, and the Zepai. Their combined forces are less than 10% of their original strength. They won't last much. Longer without help, Admiral Walsh added. President Hayes returned to her seat. Then we'd better move fast. Jake, I want you on the next transport to Harmony Prime. Tell Chancellor Zixthara that the Terran Federation is joining the fight. As the meeting broke up, Jake lingered behind. The President noticed and approached him. You have doubts? I spent 3 years arguing for neutrality, Jake said. I convinced myself it was the moral choice. Now I'm going to declare war. President Hayes put a hand on his shoulder. Jake, morality isn't about following rules. It's about doing what's right when the rules fail. The Kethver have shown us that neutrality is just another word for complicity. Jake nodded slowly. When do I leave? In 6 hours? And Jake? When you make that declaration, make it count. The galaxy needs to know that humanity is done watching. Jake left the Situation Room with new purpose. Outside, he could see crowds, still gathered around news displays. They were his people, and they deserved protection. Amy had died believing in peace, but sometimes peace could only be preserved through war, the transport to harmony. Prime would carry more than just a diplomat. It would carry humanity's declaration that some things were worth fighting for. Jake Morrison's transport ship approached Harmony Prime through a galaxy that looked very different from the one he had left. Entire star systems had gone dark. Trade routes that once bustled with merchant ships now carried only refugees fleeing. The advancing HFY swarm, the great civilization that had taken millions of years to build, was crumbling in mere months. The station itself showed signs of the war's toll. Sections that once gleamed with polished metal now bore scorch marks from desperate battles. Refugee camps had been built in former garden areas. The elegant diplomatic facility had become a fortress housing the galaxy's last hope for organized resistance. Danny White, the station's communications officer, met Jake at the docking bay. Danny looked tired and much older than his 25 years. Ambassador, good to have you back, though I wish it were under better circumstances. How bad has it gotten? Jake asked as they walked through corridors filled with wounded aliens and homeless families. The coalition is down to 3 member species, Danny replied. Chancellor Zixtara is the only original council member still here. Most of the others are either dead or have retreated to their homeworlds for final stands. They passed the medical bay where human doctors worked alongside alien healers. Jake recognized Dr. Sarah Kim from Earth's medical corps. She was treating a young Veltar child whose parents had died in the latest swarm attacks. The sight reminded Jake why he was here. What about our relief efforts? Jake asked. Stretched to the breaking point, Danny said. We're feeding 500,000 refugees with supplies meant for 50,000. The medical teams are working around the clock. Lisa Grant has been coordinating everything, but she's exhausted. Jake found Lisa in the diplomatic quarters, reviewing supply reports on multiple screens. She looked up when he entered, and he saw something new in her eyes. The idealism that had once defined her had been replaced by grim determination. Jake, she said, standing to greet him. Please tell me you brought good news from Earth. I did, Jake replied. But first, I need to know the current situation here. Lisa gestured to her screens. It's bad. The Veltar have lost their homeworld. Chancellor Zixtara is commanding what's left of their fleet from a mobile command ship. The Ethmer are down to 3 colonies, and the Zepai have maybe a dozen. Ships left. How long can they hold out? Weeks, maybe days. The Kethvar aren't even using their full strength anymore. They're just mopping up scattered resistance while they prepare for their next major expansion. Jake sat down heavily. The scale of the defeat was worse than Earth's intelligence had suggested. Where are they expanding to? Intelligence suggests they're preparing to move on the inner systems, Lisa said quietly. That includes human space. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as the speakers crackled to life. All personnel to emergency stations. Kethver forces detected approaching the system. Repeat, enemy forces inbound. Jake and Lisa ran toward the command center. Corridors filled with panic as civilians sought shelter and military personnel rushed to their posts. Jake had never seen the station under direct attack before. The command center was chaos. The few remaining alien officials worked frantically at control stations, while human personnel coordinated defensive measures. On the main screen, Jake could see the approaching threat, a small Kethvar fleet Probably a scouting force. Chancellor Zixthara stood at the center of the room, her silver skin pale with stress. She saw Jake enter and approached him immediately. "Ambassador Morrison, you have chosen a poor time to return." "Maybe not," Jake said. "I need to speak with the remaining council members immediately. Now, we are under attack. Especially now." Jake insisted. What I have to say could change everything. The Chancellor studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, but it must be quick. Our defenses will not hold for long." Within minutes, the 3 surviving coalition leaders had gathered in the emergency council chamber. Besides Chancellor Zixthara, there was Crystal Singer Nalthara of the Ethmer and War Leader Bzz Chi of the Zepai. They represented the last organized resistance to the Kethver swarm. "Honored delegates," Jake began, "I come before you today with a message from the Terran Federation. Our position in this conflict has changed." Crystal Singer Nalthara, whose crystal body reflected the emergency lighting, spoke in her musical voice. "Ambassador, if you offer more humanitarian aid, we are grateful, but supplies alone cannot save us now." "I'm not offering supplies," Jake said. "I'm offering something else entirely." The station shook as the Kethver fleet opened fire on the outer defenses. Through the chamber's windows, Jake could see explosions lighting up the darkness of space. Harmony Prime's shields flared with each impact. "What are you offering?" War Leader Bestaka asked, his insect-like voice tight with urgency. Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment everything changed. The full military might of the Terran Federation. Humanity is joining this war. The 3 alien leaders stared at him in shocked silence. For 3 years, they had begged for human military aid. Now, when all seemed lost, Jake was finally saying yes. "You mean this truly?" Chancellor Zixthara asked, her voice barely above. A whisper. "I do," Jake replied. "Earth has authorized me to make this declaration. We are done talking. We are joining the war." Crystal Singer Nalthara's body began to glow brighter, a sign of strong emotion among her people. "But why now, when hope seems lost?" "Because neutrality was an illusion," Jake said. "The Kethver don't recognize non-combatants. They see all life as resources to harvest. The attack on Meridian Station proved that nowhere is safe from them." War Leader Pestaka clicked his mandibles together, a gesture of agreement. "The swarm respects only strength. Your species has hidden its strength too long." Another series of explosions rocked the station. The lights flickered, and Jake could hear the sounds of structural damage echoing through the halls. The defense platforms were failing. What forces can humanity commit? Chancellor Zixthara asked. "Everything," Jake said simply. "We have been preparing for this war longer than you know. Our shipyards have been building new classes of vessels. Our scientists have developed weapons specifically designed to fight the Kethver." The Chancellor's eyes widened. "You have been preparing? But your neutrality was a cover," Jake admitted. "We needed time to study the enemy and develop countermeasures. We also needed to be certain that joining the war was the right choice. And now you are certain?" Jake thought of Amy, of Dr. Peter Collins, of the millions who had died while humanity watched from the sidelines. "Yes, we are certain." The station shook again, more violently this time. On the command screens, Jake could see that the outer defense grid had failed. Keth-4 bioships were moving closer to the station itself. "If we survive this attack," Crystal Singer Nalthara said, "how soon can your forces arrive?" "They're already on their way," Jake said. "Admiral Karen Walsh is commanding the first battle group. They should arrive within hours." War Leader Bzz Ka made a sound that might have been laughter. "You planned this carefully." "We had to," Jake replied. "This war has taught us that the Kethvar can only be defeated through overwhelming force applied at the right moment. That moment is now. Suddenly, the sounds of battle outside changed. Instead of the steady pounding of Kethver weapons, Jake heard different explosions. Brighter flashes lit up the windows, but these were coming from the direction of the attacking. Fleet. Danny White's voice came over the communication system. All stations, this is communications. New contacts detected jumping into the system, identifying as human vessels. Repeat, human fleet has arrived. The three alien leaders looked at Jake with amazement. Chancellor Zixthara moved to a window and stared out at the battle. I see them, she whispered. Ships like nothing I have seen before. Jake joined her at the window. In the distance, he could see the sleek forms of human warships engaging the Kethvar bioships. The alien vessels, which had seemed so terrifying moments before, were being systematically destroyed by weapons they had never encountered. Admiral Walsh doesn't waste time, Jake said with satisfaction. Within an hour, the battle was over. The Kethva scouting fleet had been completely destroyed, with no human losses reported. The three coalition leaders stood in stunned silence as they watched human ships patrol the system. How? Crystal Singer Nalfara asked. The swarm ships are nearly indestructible, not to human weapons, Jake said. We've learned to target their biological systems. What makes them strong against your technology makes them vulnerable to ours. Chancellor. Zixthara turned to face Jake directly. Ambassador Morrison, if what I have seen today is truly representative of human capabilities, then perhaps this war is not lost. Jake smiled for the first time in months. Chancellor, the war isn't lost. It's just beginning. And this time, humanity is fighting back. The human entry into the war changed everything overnight. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human flagship Terra Nova, watching as Captain Ryan Cross coordinated the largest military operation in human history. Through the massive viewing windows, Jake could see hundreds of human warships moving in perfect formation toward their targets. Admiral Walsh were receiving surrender signals from 3 more Kethvar bioships, Captain Cross reported. That makes 17 this hour. Admiral Karen Walsh studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Accept their surrender and transfer them to the containment ships. Dr. Rodriguez will want to study them. Jake moved closer to the display. It showed the Veltar system, where human forces had been fighting for 6 days to liberate the Coalition's former capital world. The red markers representing Kethvar forces were disappearing one by one as human weapons proved devastatingly effective against swarm biotechnology. How are our ground forces doing? Jake asked. Colonel Santos reports the capital city is secure, Admiral Walsh replied. The Kethvar processing facilities have been destroyed, and we freed over 2 million prisoners. Jake felt a surge of hope. For months, he had watched the galaxy burn while humanity remained neutral. Now they were not just fighting back, but winning. Any word about the other systems? Captain Cross activated another display. General Barnes is leading the assault on the Kethvar staging area in the Outer Rim. Early reports suggest complete success. The enemy fleet was caught completely off guard. The past weeks had shown that humanity's secret preparations had been worth the wait. Human ships, designed specifically to fight biological enemies, cut through Kethvar fleets like knives through fabric. Human soldiers, equipped with bioresistant armor and genetic disruption weapons, systematically liberated world after world. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen from her mobile laboratory. She looked exhausted but excited. Jake, Admiral, I have news from the prisoner interrogations. What kind of news? Admiral Walsh asked. We've located the Kethvar Central Hive, Elena said. It's a massive biostructure in the Perseus arm, about 6 months from here, at maximum jump speed. More importantly, We've learned how their command structure works. Jake leaned forward. Explain. The swarm isn't as unified as we thought. They're controlled by a series of hive queens, each commanding a sector of space. The queens compete with each other for resources and territory. If we can eliminate the queens, the entire swarm will collapse into chaos. Admiral Walsh smiled grimly. How many queens are there? 17, according to our prisoners. But here's the interesting part. 3 of them have already been killed in our recent attacks. The remaining queens are panicking. This was better news than Jake had dared hope for. What does panic look like for a hive queen? They're withdrawing forces from conquered territory to protect themselves, Helena explained. Entire sectors that were under swarm control 6 months ago are now abandoned. The queens are more afraid of each other than they are of us. Captain Cross interrupted with an urgent report. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Zixthara wants to speak with Ambassador Morrison immediately. The Chancellor's image appeared on the main screen. She looked different than when Jake had last seen her. The despair that had marked her features for so long had been replaced by something Jake had not seen in years. Hope. Ambassador Morrison, she said, I am calling to report a miracle. Veltar Prime is free. My people are returning to their homeworld for the first time in 2 years. Jake smiled. Congratulations, Chancellor. How are the survivors? Weak, but alive. Your medical teams are providing excellent care. But that is not why I called. Her expression grew more serious. I wanted to tell you that 17 species have contacted the Coalition in the past week. They want to rejoin the fight. 17? Admiral Walsh sounded surprised. I thought most of the galaxy had given up. They had, the Chancellor admitted. But your victories have shown them that the swarm can be beaten. Species that had hidden in their home systems for years are now sending ships to join our fleets. Jake felt a warmth spreading through his chest. Humanity's decision to join the war was not just saving human lives, but restoring hope throughout the galaxy. What kind of forces are they offering? Everything they have left, Chancellor Zixthara replied. The Corvani are sending their entire merchant fleet converted to warships. The Hektai have offered their crystal weapons technology. Even the Pacifist Union has voted to provide medical support. The communication was interrupted by another alarm. Jake tensed, expecting news of a Kethver counterattack. Instead, Captain Cross looked up with a huge grin. Admiral, General Barnes reports total victory in the Outer Rim. The Kethver staging area has been completely destroyed. He estimates we've eliminated 30% of the swarm's remaining forces. Cheers erupted throughout the bridge. Jake watched human and alien crew members embrace each other with joy. For the first time since the war began, it felt like victory was actually possible. 3 months later, Jake stood once again in the council chamber of Harmony Prime, but this time the chamber was full. Representatives from 43 species had gathered to sign the new Galactic Compact, a treaty that would reshape civilization throughout the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast live to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Jake had been chosen to represent humanity in the signing, an honor that still amazed him. Chancellor Zixthara stood beside him, along with leaders from every species that had joined the final push against the Kethver. Today marks the end of the darkest chapter in galactic history, Jake said into the recording devices. But more importantly, it marks the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual defense. The Kethver swarm had been broken 6 weeks earlier when human forces destroyed the central hive structure. Without their queens to coordinate them, the remaining swarm forces had turned on each other or fled to the galaxy's rim. Billions of prisoners had been freed from processing facilities across dozens of worlds. Amy was among the survivors. The reunion with his niece had been the happiest moment of Jake's life. She was changed by her experience, marked by the horrors she had witnessed, but she was alive. More importantly, she had maintained her faith in the possibility of peace. The war taught us that neutrality in the face of evil is not wisdom, but cowardice, Jake continued. But it also taught us that when good beings stand together, no force in the universe can stand against them. Chancellor Zixthara stepped forward to add her words. Humanity waited to join this fight, but when they came with a plan and the tools to win. Today, we sign more than a treaty. We sign a promise that such horrors will never again be allowed to spread unchecked. A signing took hours, as each species added their agreement to the compact. The document established new principles for galactic civilization, mutual defense against threats like the swarm, shared technology development, and most importantly, the promise that no species would ever again face extinction alone. As the ceremony concluded, Jake found himself standing beside Admiral Walsh at one of the great windows. Outside, ships from dozens of species moved in peaceful formation. The galaxy was healing. Any regrets about our decision? Admiral Walsh asked. Jake thought about the 3 years of neutrality, the countless meetings where he had refused to help, the species that had died while humanity watched. Then he thought about Amy, about the billions of lives saved, about the hope that now filled the galaxy. Only one, Jake said quietly. That we waited so long to do the right thing. Admiral Walsh nodded. But we did do it. In the end, that's what matters. Jake continued to stare out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Kethver swarm might be regrouping. New threats might emerge from unknown space. But the galaxy would face them together now, united by the knowledge that cooperation and courage could overcome any darkness. The age of neutrality was over. The age of hope had begun.